Innovation is not the moonshot. Innovation is the mindset. It's a mindset that leads to the moonshot. I used to define innovation as turning creativity into money. What I mean by that is taking the ideas that are the foundation of innovation and turning them into something of value. That's the part that people miss. A lot of leaders tend to conflate innovation and creativity, or use them almost interchangeably. Creativity is the coming up with the ideas. That's important, but a bunch of ideas on their own are a dime a dozen. It's what do you do with them to create something of value? Now that value might be actual money. It might be a new invention, a new product, a new service. It might be a savings in time. Whatever you consider to be value, it's not necessarily coming up with the one that changes everything. That's great if you got it. But that also tends to discount all the smaller innovations that really make a difference on a day-to-day basis. So again, I would say innovation, it's not a moonshot, it's a mindset.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where we explore the mindset, skills, and behaviors that leaders need to grow influence that truly matters. This time, we're going to talk about innovation. Innovation is not a luxury anymore. It's the lifeblood of organizations that want to stay relevant in a world that refuses to slow down. In this episode of Leadership, we're joined by Bill Stainton, author of Innovation Unleashed: How to Find the Ideas That Matter and Transform Your Business. Bill brings a rare blend of creativity, discipline, and real-world experience, drawing from his years producing award-winning television and helping leaders unlock the kind of thinking that moves companies forward. In this conversation, we'll explore why innovation often stalls, how some leaders unintentionally shut down great ideas, and what it takes to build a culture where creativity is not a buzzword, it's a habit. Whether you're leading a team, shaping strategy, or simply trying to think differently so you can move from incremental improvement to breakthrough innovation. Bill's insights will challenge you to rethink what's possible and give you tools you can use immediately. Bill, welcome to Leadership.
Thanks, Roger. After that introduction, I can't wait to hear what I have to say.
Well, I understand.
I mean, you really raised the bar. I wasn't anticipating that. I'm going to have to up my game.
Okay, well, here you go. Well, first, if you don't mind, tell us how your background in television shaped your thinking about innovation. And I'm sure our listeners would love to hear you illustrate that with your story about a young guy on your staff by the name of Bill Nye.
Oh, yeah. I remember him.
You remember him?
I do. Well, it was interesting. I've done a number of things in television, but the bulk of my television career was the 15 years I spent producing what ended up being the longest running, highest rated, and most award-winning regional comedy TV show in the United States. In essence, it was as I look back on it now, it was basically a 15-year innovation lab that I was running under the guise of a comedy TV show. Because here's the thing. Our job, literally, Roger, was to be innovative every single week for 15 years, whether we felt like it or not.
Yeah.
So for us, innovation, as you said, was not a luxury. It was a Tuesday. We had to be innovative on demand. So we had to learn the skills to that, and also learn that it is possible to be innovative on demand continuously, week after week after week, month after month after month, year after year after year. That's how you build that legacy. So that's what we found out through working in television. We got instant feedback. We could try something. If it didn't work, we could retool it for the next week or the next season. That's also an important part of that. And then we also had to learn how to deal with what to do when things don't turn out the way you think they're going to. Because that's life, isn't it? There was a time, I vividly remember it, when I booked a guest on the show, Johnny Depp, movie star Johnny Depp. He was not a movie star yet. He was a TV star. he was a fan of the show. He was doing a TV series called 21 Jump Street. And that was being shot in Vancouver, BC. We're in Seattle, Washington. It's like, 2.5, 3 hours away.
Right.
So I called him and he said, yeah, he's a fan of the show. So he'd love to be a guest on the show. So I booked him to be a guest on the show. And we were just, when the day came around, that Saturday came around, we were vibrating with excitement. Because back in those days, Seattle was, we didn't have Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks. It was just...
You were it.
Yeah, we were it. We had there's a company here that makes airplanes. Their name escapes me, but that's about all we had. It was tough to get good guests. Nobody wanted to fly way up into the northwest corner of the country, but we got one. We got Johnny Depp. We're so excited. He's, everything's going to be great. Until around 11 in the morning or so on the day of the show. The day of the show, I get a call from Johnny Depp. He has to cancel. They're doing reshoots for 21 Jump Street and he couldn't get out of it. He was very polite, but he couldn't get out of it. So we're trying to come up with somebody, who else can we get to be a guest on the show? Obviously, it's got to be somebody local. It's like, what about the Seahawks? They're out of town. What about and we're tossing out names and nothing's working. And, meanwhile, the clock is ticking. We've got a show to do. There's a live studio audience coming.
Yeah,
we have to do something. We don't have the option to just put up a slide that says, sorry, no show. We couldn't get our act together. Just like in business, you don't really have that option, right? I mean, the show must go on is a showbiz maxim, but it's also a business maxim.
Sure.
Or should be at least. So, the clock is ticking and we're just like, we're striking out, trying to get a guest to interview. Until all of a sudden, my lowest paid writer has a quote unquote brilliant idea, which we didn't like. He said, well, maybe I could do something, put me on. Maybe I could do something with liquid nitrogen, which scared the heck out of us because.
Going to blow up the place. Yeah.
Could blow up the place. We don't know. And, first of all, he's the lowest paid writer. So right away, we discount him. It's like, shut up. The grown-ups are trying to solve a problem. Because we do that, and I'm sure we'll get into this later on. We do that. We tend to discount certain people. The lowest paid writer, the quiet one, the introvert, the new person, the lower ranking person, the whatever. So it's like, shut up. But then again, the clock, tick, 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 tick. Finally, it's like, okay, tell us about this liquid nitrogen. And he told us. He said, well, it's really, this could work. I mean, liquid nitrogen, it's really cold. You put a marshmallow in it. I take that marshmallow out, pop it in my mouth, bite down, smoke pours out of my nose and mouth. And we all thought, oh, cool. And that's the night that my lowest paid writer, Bill Nye, became Bill Nye the Science Guy. All because he saw things differently than we did. We were all writers and producers. We were looking for a guest to interview. And Bill Nye saw the world differently because he is a science guy. He's a trained engineer. He studied with Carl Sagan. So he saw the world differently than we did. And he was able to bring that into the equation. And
now he's world famous.
Now he's world famous. In fact, just a few months ago, I was with him in Los Angeles watching him get his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah. And he influenced a generation of people. As a keynote speaker now, I routinely talk to industries. Sometimes it's engineers, mechanics, whatever. But whenever it's any kind of an industry that has any kind of a science or engineering background, as soon as I mention Bill Nye, the Science Guy, half the guys, and it's usually guys, not exclusively, they almost start to cry because they grew up
with
watching him. I mean, it's like, this is why I got into engineering. This is why I got into science, because of Bill Nye, the Science Guy. And Bill Nye, the Science Guy, happened because a guest canceled at the last minute.
Yeah, they might not cry if you talked about Johnny Depp.
I'm guessing they wouldn't. Some of the women might, but yeah.
So, Bill, how do you define innovation differently than most business leaders?
Oh, man, that's a great question. What I've found, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this also, most business leaders, when they hear the word innovation, they tend to think of the moonshot. Inventing the iPhone, coming up with the electric vehicle, the big idea that just, explodes the game, changes the game. That's great. That's wonderful. I don't define it that way, though. Innovation is not the moonshot. Innovation is the mindset. It's a mindset that leads to the moonshot. I used to define innovation as turning creativity into money. What I mean by that is taking the ideas that are the foundation of innovation and turning them into something of value. That's the part that people miss. A lot of leaders tend to conflate innovation and creativity, or use them almost interchangeably. Creativity is the coming up with the ideas. That's important, but a bunch of ideas on their own are a dime a dozen. It's what do you do with them to create something of value? Now, that value might be actual money. It might be a new invention, a new product, a new service. It might be a savings in time, whatever you consider to be value. But taking something and turning it into something of value. It's not just coming up with a bunch of ideas. A lot of leaders think that that's it. And it's not necessarily coming up with the one that changes everything. That's great if you got it. But that also tends to discount all the smaller innovations that really make a difference on a day-to-day level, on a day-to-day basis. So again, I would say innovation, it's not a moonshot, it's a mindset.
Well, and the small innovations add up, and that becomes part of the expected culture, I think, in an organization. They begin to see that maybe the junior person at the table actually can have a good idea. Maybe the brand new hire who's asking all the why questions is asking some questions that really need attention.
Absolutely. I love what you said there about asking all the why questions, the questions that a veteran in the organization might be too afraid to ask because they think, oh, that's going to make me look stupid. But those are the questions that need to be asked.
Sure.
That's why it's good to bring in an outside voice, an outside point of view every now and then, just like Bill Nye was an outsider. Yes, he was also a writer and performer for the show, but he had that other little dot. I call it collecting dots. He had that other point of view that we didn't have. So he could bring something, he could look at it through a different lens, a different prism. And the new person who asks the annoying why question could be your best friend.
Sure.
Because they might ask the why question on something that you've been taking for granted, you and your entire team, because it's, the way it's always been done, or look, things are working just fine. But they ask a why, and if you pause before discounting it and think, ooh, okay, really, why? Why?
Yeah.
Maybe the thing that you're doing, the thing that he or she is asking the why about, was based on a problem that no longer exists, or was the solution to a problem that no longer exists.
Sure, and it doesn't end with just one why question. It typically needs to be a series of them. You're really challenging the status quo.
Yeah, Toyota's famous 5 whys. And that goes to making sure that you're solving the right problem. Innovation at its very core is really nothing more than problem solving. Solving a problem in a new way, which it's all about problem solving. But you got to make sure you're solving the right problem, not solving a symptom. And that's what the 5 whys does. It makes sure you're not solving a symptom. Okay, well, here's the problem. Okay, why is that a problem? Well, because of this, because of this, because of this, oh, you know what? This is really the problem. You might be spending a lot of energy, money, and resources solving a downstream symptom rather than the upstream problem, which could be a much, much, much less expensive issue to resolve.
Sure. Well, here's a why question. Why do so many organizations struggle to innovate even when they claim it's a priority? Why do they struggle?
First of all, every organization claims it's a priority. It's up on the poster in the break room. Look, It's one of our core values, innovation. There we go. Done. Now we can move on. We've put it behind plexiglass. Therefore, we are an innovative organization. That's kind of meaningless. It's very, very easy to do that. Here's what I find over and over and over again. The red box that you see on the walls of companies and in case of fire, break glass.
Right.
It seems to me that too many organizations have this proverbial red box on the wall that says, in case of fire, innovate. And that's the only time they break the glass. That's the only time they innovate, when a crisis happens. Here's the problem with that. Yes, when a crisis happens, you want to innovate, but you want to know how to innovate. I'll give you an analogy. If you've ever tried to use Photoshop or some software like that, if you use it once a year, every time you have to use it, it's going to be like, okay, now how do we do this again? How do I select an image? How do I change the color on this thing? If you use it every day, you see these people who use it every day, they're not even thinking. They know how to do all this. It's the same thing with innovation. If you save innovation for a special occasion, like a crisis, it's like, oh, now we need to innovate. Okay, how do we do that again?
Right, right.
You're going to be rusty. You're not going to be good. I spend a lot of time on airplanes. I'm sure you do too. I'd like to know that my pilot has done a few landings in the past week.
That would be nice.
As opposed to one a year, So with innovation, I think the problem that I see is that too many organizations treat innovation like an event rather than a process.
Right.
And it should be a process. It should be built in to the DNA. And the only way to do that is to continually practice innovation before you need it. Like build that into your culture. And there are ways to do that. But the important thing is to be consistent and to do it regularly.
Keep the muscles strong.
That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly.
You're going to need them virtually daily. Don't wait for a crisis. In fact, it could be argued that if you innovate regularly, you're going to have fewer crises.
You will, especially if you anticipate them, which is also a part of innovation. It's seeing what's around the corner before everybody else does. But that's a great analogy. It's like if you go to the gym once a year, I don't care how good that workout is or how long you spend for that one time a year. A month later, if you need to lift something heavy, you're not going to be able to. It's just not going to work out.
For sure. So, Bill, you say innovation is learnable. What makes you confident about that?
Because I've seen it happen. I mean, I've learned it myself. Again, going back to the TV show, for 15 years, we had to be innovative every single week. Now, for the first few years, that was really difficult. After a while, it got to be pretty easy because we learned that there are ways to jumpstart innovation. It's a skill set. I think what really happens is that we're kind of born knowing how to innovate. We have the raw ingredients when we're born.
Yeah.
We have curiosity. Every newborn is curious about the world. Every newborn likes to solve problems. How does this work? They want to figure out how to put the blocks together. If you try and show them, they get bored right away because that takes the buzz out of it. They've got the raw ingredients, and then it gets taught out of us for a number of reasons, some good, some necessary, some unnecessary and bad. So the first thing is to realize that we already know how to innovate. We already know this skill. This is not an exclusive skill set reserved for others. We have this. And then it's just learning. There are some things that you can do. Innovation, it's about solving problems. It's also about thinking differently. There are ways to trick your brain into thinking differently. Asking a different question. Bill Nye did that.
Yeah.
We were all asking, going back to that story, we were all asking, who can we get as a guest to interview? Bill Nye was asking a different question. He was asking, how can we fill the time? That completely changes the context.
Sure.
All of a sudden, there's a whole world of possibilities that question unpacks that the first question didn't unpack. So just learn how to ask different questions. Right away, you're going to unlock possibility and opportunity and innovation. So it comes down to just a few simple skills that we already know how to do, but we just have to do them over and over and over again. Make it a habit.
Well, that leads to another question. In a routine meeting, what's a simple way to spark innovative thinking? What can somebody do to ignite that spark, if you will?
First, ask a different question. Well, let's take it from the point of view of the leader of the meeting.
Right.
The person in charge of the meeting. One of the best things they can do is shut up, because here we get into...
let somebody else fill the silence.
You had a great phrase in one of your previous episodes. I think it was with Colin Fisher, where you talked about gladiators with microphones.
Right.
You were talking about TV pundits at the time.
Sure.
I love that phrase, but that's kind of what the leader, what the boss is in a meeting. They may not have a literal microphone, but just by virtue of being the boss, they've got a microphone. They've got a platform. So if they lead the conversation with, here's what I think, what do you think? Everybody else, most of the time, is going to say, we agree with you. So one of the best things a leader can do is go last. But if you really want to spark innovative thinking, stop brainstorming. Because brainstorming, in its traditional sense, doesn't work. And it's kind of tied to the same thing. Because when you brainstorm, usually people think, okay, well, here's the issue. Let's just throw out ideas. No bad ideas.
Sometimes brainstorming is storming without brains.
That's absolutely right. Storming without brains. Because what happens is somebody tosses out an idea and it gets shouted down by the loud people or the more senior people. And all of a sudden, everybody else is afraid to give ideas or give an idea that might be different. Here's a much better way to do it, Roger. Figure out what the problem is. And that goes back to like 5 whys and whatever. But however you make sure you're solving the right problem or the right issue or the right challenge or the right opportunity, whatever it is. And then give everybody individual time, like on their own, like go back to your own office, your own cubicle, go home for the evening and come up with 20 ideas. Okay? I mean, don't just come up with one idea, because when it comes to creativity, the generation of ideas, quantity beats quality. So individually, they come up with ideas and they write them down on a piece of paper, or they type them up onto a piece of paper or something. And then when you come back into the group meeting, you just scatter them around so that nobody knows whose ideas are whose.
Right.
That way you take that whole mess out of the equation. Now the ideas are being evaluated just based on the ideas. And so that creates this sense of psychological safety.
Sure.
Nobody has to be afraid of their ideas being thought of as stupid. Or if they do, it's the idea, not the person behind the idea.
Right.
That makes a whole lot of difference. What this also helps to do, we've all been in these kind of quote unquote brainstorming sessions where somebody throws out an idea and all of a sudden everybody shifts into evaluation mode. It's the difference between divergent and convergent thinking. Divergent is, coming up with a bunch of ideas. Convergent is the editing of it. Those are two different processes and they don't belong together. When you're trying to come up with ideas, you shouldn't judge them. So this also helps to avoid that because the ideas are generated in a completely different way. And so now there are all these ideas out there. Now you can start judging them when it's appropriate. You shift modes, basically. But if you're trying to go back and forth between those modes, it just doesn't work very well.
All this is reminding me of one of my favorite innovation stories, the guy at 3M Corporation who was working in the lab, and they came up with this concoction that was, in their view, a failure. Well, he sang in the church choir, and people would have pieces of paper in the hymn book, apparently, and they would fall down. It was very awkward, and it made him think, I wonder if that so-called failure in our lab could be helpful. Anyway, long story short, the sticky but not too sticky substance led to the Post-it note,
right,
which is one of the great products of 3M. I mean, I don't think there's anybody on the globe who doesn't use Post-it notes sometime, somewhere. It started as a failure, and then there was a guy who said, wait a minute, maybe it could be used this way. Now, to me, that's innovative thinking.
That's absolutely innovative thinking, because it would have been very easy to say, well, that's a failure.
Yeah.
And okay, that goes in the garbage can, never to be seen again. But he asked a further question. It's okay, well, what could this be used for? What can we learn from this? Is there something that this could be good for? And look, maybe the answer is no, but at least ask the question. Because the questions we ask define the possibilities. Just like when Bill Nye asked, how can we fill the time? As opposed to, who can we interview? When we ask those different questions, I wonder, could that quote unquote failure be used for this? And I would be curious to see how much of 3M's profit comes from that mistake.
They've made some money on that, I'm pretty sure.
I think they've made a bit of money. It's being willing to see the other possibilities. Are there other things we can do with this? Just because it's a failure for this, is there a different problem that it could solve?
My guess is after that experience at that production table with Bill Nye, people might have listened to him even more after that. Is that true?
Well, I can see why you might think that, but you don't know Bill Nye. So it wasn't necessarily true, but I'll tell you what it did do, Roger. So it was my job as the producer to say what went on the air and what didn't. So I'm the one who said, okay, fine, we'll put you on the air. That was meant to be a one-time only stopgap because something went wrong. Okay, we'll fill the air. It probably won't be an Emmy award-winning show, but we'll fill the air. And, but it was such a hit that I don't think I waited more than 3 weeks before saying, hey, what else do you have for us? And brought him back. He already worked for the show, but, brought him back to do another Science Guy segment. I don't know how many we did in all, but Initially, it was like, shut up, Bill. The grown-ups are trying to solve a problem, to we've got this ace up our sleeve called Bill Nye the Science Guy. When it comes to Bill Nye the Science Guy, yes, we treated him differently. When it came to just Bill Nye, no, we treated him the same.
Okay. So other than maybe shutting somebody down because of rank or whatever, what other habits subtly undermine an innovative culture? What do you see?
I think there are a few things. Over-celebrating perfection is one of them. So only perfect things work. Only celebrating victories as opposed to celebrating the smart failures as well.
And talk about, here's what we learned.
Exactly.
It was a failure in that sense, but it was a victory in that we learned what doesn't work, and that can lead us to what does work.
Right, exactly. Shutting down failure too much. I don't even like using the word failure, but it's part of the language. So, or these organizations, and I've seen it, you've seen it, everybody listening has seen it. The organizations that say, again, no bad ideas, and yes, we are risk takers and we are innovators, and yet the behavior punishes risk takers unless it pays off. So if you only reward risks that pay off, what that means is that eventually your team, they're only going to start suggesting safe things that have a pretty good chance of success. So they're going to come up with the safe ideas, which may not be the best ideas. They may not be the ideas that really move things forward. Those might be the ideas that just keep you where you are, just treading water. And you and I both know the world is changing too fast. Treading water is not a winning strategy at this point.
Sure.
So you need to be able to really reward, put your money where your mouth is, put your behavior where your mouth is. And when people come up with ideas that seem a little far out, okay, maybe they'll work, maybe they won't work, but you need to at least explore them. Let everybody know that their ideas are valued, that you really do want those different ideas.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
We had a great conversation on the podcast with Amy Edmondson at Harvard. She's the one she coined the phrase psychological safety. Right. She's done a ton of research on that, and one of the things she learned early on was that an important key to psychological safety in a culture is to help people understand that it's okay to take a risk. You're not going to be punished for it. That one of the best ways for us to learn is to try things. And I think that's what you're saying. Make it safe for people to try things, to speak up, to challenge the status quo.
Exactly. People have to know that a number of things when it comes to psychological safety. They have to know that ideas are really welcome, that it's not just a platitude, it's not just something that the boss says, that the organization says, that ideas are genuinely welcomed. Yes, they want to hear what I have to say. They want to know that their ideas will be considered. It's not terribly important whether or not their ideas are used. They just want to know they got a fair hearing. And if it's not used, It would be nice if you could say, here's why, or here's why not. So at least, all right, that's, and I can agree or disagree, but at least I feel seen, heard, appreciated, respected. That's the key.
Sure. So what behaviors from leaders tend to discourage innovation? We've touched on some of them. Tell us what you've seen.
Shooting down ideas too quickly. That happens all the time. Interrupting people. Again, let's assume there's a meeting, falling into the trap of thinking that the loudest person is right. Also, here's something that leaders need to do. Imagine that the team is sitting around a table and you're looking for ideas, okay? It's the leader's job to make sure that everybody is heard. I remember I was once the president of a local nonprofit. It was a chapter of an association. And I think there were like 8 or 9 people on the board. And when my term was up and it was time to turn it over to the next person, some of the board members were continuing on, but my term was up. And then the incoming president asked me, so, okay, what do I need to know? I said, well, you'll get some good ideas. Deanna is not going to give you much. She shows up, but she just kind of sits there. So don't expect much from her. This person knew Deanna a lot better than I did. Are you kidding? Deanna is one of the most brilliant marketing minds I've ever known. Okay, my bad. I didn't know that, but it wasn't Deanna's job to jump into the meetings. It was my job to make sure. Deanna also was very, very introverted, and there were some loud people, myself being one of them, who tended to overpower the meetings. So I never got to benefit from Deanna's brilliance because I chose not to recognize it. I chose not to see what she had. It's the leader's job to make sure that everybody at the table, whether the table is, literal or metaphorical, to make sure that everybody at the table has a voice. Because if you don't listen to the lowest paid writer, if you don't listen to the quiet people, the introverts, 50% of people identify as leaning towards introversion in one way or another. 50%. That's half of your team statistically. You might be missing out on half of your team's best ideas just because you're not giving them the space to show up and be heard.
Sure. I keep going back to that meeting with your lowest paid writer. When Bill Nye said, I might be able to do something with liquid nitrogen, it would have been very easy for somebody to say, get out of here. We got to find a guest. But instead, somebody, and maybe it was you, said, tell us more.
It was not me, but yes, that's exactly right.
Somebody did. And when he told you about the marshmallow and smoke coming out of his nose and mouth, okay, we might have something here.
Exactly.
So always asking, tell me more, tell me more. Now, that can sometimes be a challenge to somebody who hasn't really thought through their idea, but if it force the issue, get some conversation going.
That's another reason why letting people think on their own individually, come up with the ideas individually, and then evaluate them as a group pays off, because people who lean towards introversion, they like to think before speaking, whereas other people like to speak before thinking. You and I both know people like that. Those tend to be the loud ones. The ones who like to think first, they never have the time to think because the loud people are just, filling all the space. But if you allow people to come up with ideas individually, well, now you've got both groups covered. If I had done that with Deanna, I would have known about her brilliance because she would have come with these ideas that she's had a chance to think about and put down on paper or however we chose to do it. But that was on me.
Well, and a leader, of course, can help create and maintain a good culture of innovation by making sure that the quieter people are called on. And then people begin to understand, I'm kind of quiet. I don't have a lot to say, but the leader's going to call on me, so I probably should be ready with something.
That's a really good insight. You're absolutely right. And that happens over time. Over time, the team starts to realize, okay, this is what the expectation is. This is where the bar is now. This is where the bar has been raised to. Okay. And people, by and large, they will rise or sink to the level of expectation.
Sure.
So if you expect more and just let it be known that this is valued, okay, eventually they'll get the idea, some faster than others.
Yeah. Well, in terms of creating and maintaining that culture, that kind of culture, what's the connection between storytelling and innovation? I know you have told the Bill Nye story probably a couple of dozen times. Is that safe to say?
A few times, yeah.
It's a great story, and you have lots and lots of other stories. If you're a leader in an organization, meeting with your team regularly, or maybe a larger team like the employee population, what role does storytelling play in creating and maintaining a good, innovative culture?
That's a really intriguing question, Roger. I'm not sure anybody's ever asked me that before or even thought to connect those two dots of innovation and storytelling. But there is a connection. Innovation, Well, you know something about this. I've talked to loads of leaders who say, yeah, but I come up with these innovative ideas. I'm having trouble getting buy-in from my team or buy-in from senior leadership about this idea. We've got these great ideas, but then they just get killed. Why is that by and large? Well, there's a few reasons, but one of them is that they're not communicating the innovation in a way that the others are hearing it, because they might be citing, charts and ROI and profit margins and all that sort of thing. That's all wonderful. We're not hardwired for that. We are literally hardwired for stories.
For sure. Oh, absolutely.
Beginning, middle, end. The earliest known human communication we have are the cave paintings in Lascaux, France, and other places. Those aren't individual drawings. Some of them are, but those are stories.
Sure.
Usually it's the story of the hunt. There's a beginning, a middle, and end. Those are stories. So we are hardwired for stories. And you know this as well as I do. You hear somebody talking, whether it's the boss in a corporation or a speaker on the stage. When they start a story, we all kind of lean in just a little bit.
Absolutely.
Oh, there's a story. There's a story here. I mean, why do you think we binge out on Netflix? Because the stories, we want the stories. We don't want the bar charts. Yes, those may be important in their time, but to try and communicate something effectively so that everybody can feel that excitement, tell the story. Tell the story of what our world will look like after this innovation, what the world is going to look like on the other side of the chaos, because innovation is dealing with change. I mean, innovation means changing something. And I know you know a lot about that subject. And change is inherently messy. There's that messy middle part. It's not a straight line. There's that messy middle part. And it's easy to get discouraged when you're in that messy middle part. That's why you need to keep telling the story of here's the promised land. Here's where we're going. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's the picture. Here's the story. Not here's the profit loss statement. Here's the story of that. I don't know why every leader doesn't study storytelling. I don't understand. To me, it's one of the primary leadership skills that somebody could possibly have.
Oh, no doubt. The very best leaders I know, and I've known a few, deliberately hone their storytelling skills. I mean, it's not even unconscious. They consciously have a repertoire of stories to share at a given time. When they have a stockholder meeting, they have stories. It's not just charts and graphs. When they have a production meeting, it's not just mechanical stuff. It's stories.
Right.
Very powerful.
The best leaders will invest in that. They'll hire a coach. I have friends who specifically coach leaders on stories.
Yeah.
Because it's that important.
So how do you evaluate whether an idea is worth pursuing? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a great point, Roger, because so many people think that innovation is just the coming up with the ideas.
Yeah.
That's the fun part. That's the creative part. But let's say, okay, now you've come up with, let's just make it easy. And let's say we've come up with 100 ideas. Okay, well, we can't do 100 ideas. So how do you figure out which ones, or ideally one, is the one worth pursuing now, today? And there are a number of filters. I'll just talk about three right now. The first filter is that it has to be in alignment. And we're talking to businesses here. Businesses, business owners, business leaders. I'm speaking specifically in that context.
Right.
That the innovation, first and foremost, has to be in alignment with the goals, the vision, the values of the organization overall.
Sure.
So it's got to be in alignment. If it's not going to work out anyway. So you have to make sure that those things are in alignment. That's a pretty easy one. But some people tend to forget it. They think, oh, come on, this is a great innovative idea. Well, that's not what we're about here. So, okay, then you have to think of it like a Venn diagram. There's feasibility, viability, and desirability. Those are the three circles. In TV, I refer to it as, can we shoot it? Can we buy it? Can we sell it? Shooting means, I don't mean like shooting a gun. I mean like, filming. Can we film it? So feasibility is, do we have the tools to even do this idea? Do we have the workforce for it? Do we have the plant space for it? Do we have, whatever it takes. Okay, well, we need, 15 reams of construction paper to do this. Well, do we have those 15 reams of construction paper? Can we get them? Is it feasible to do this? Is it viable, which means do we have the money for it and will it return a profit? That may or may not be in terms of actual cash money. We talked about that before. But is it viable? And then is it desirable? Like, does anybody actually want this? Does it really solve a problem that other people have? Or is this just somebody's like cool idea? Let's do this because it will be fun to do it. Does it solve a problem? So those three circles of the Venn diagram need to intersect. Now, they don't have to intersect at the same strength. It doesn't have to be equal 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 necessarily, depending on the situation. But you need to at least consider all three of those. And then I like to take these ideas and put them through a matrix, actually a series of matrices, but just a simple XY matrix. I know people are listening to this. You can't see I'm forming an XY brilliantly, I might add, with my hands here. Yeah, isn't it beautiful?
Take my word for it, folks.
Yeah, I'm really painting a picture here. Look, it's the first one is it's the simple Eisenhower matrix. I didn't come up with this. It's the impact effort. How much effort will this take and how much impact will it really have? And ideally, you're looking for the ideas or idea that falls into the high impact, low effort. Those are the ones that you want to do first. Like this isn't, we can do this relatively easily, relatively quickly, relatively inexpensively. The dividends far outweigh what has to happen to put into it. Those are the things, okay, start on those today, start on those tomorrow. And then you go to the ones that are high impact, high effort. Okay, those are the ones that you want to plan for. Okay, let's put them on the back burner and let's start working towards that, but that's going to take a little more effort. The ones that are low impact, why bother? Now, if it's low impact, low effort, and it's just something like, okay, this might be interesting. Okay, sure. If it's really low effort, yeah, give it a shot. If it's low impact, high effort, no. So you take those 100 ideas and you just start plotting them out on that matrix. Where are they in the matrix? Which quadrant are they in? How high up? How far to the left or right in that quadrant? And you'll start to see these patterns. And all of a sudden, things kind of become very apparent. Now, that's just the impact effort matrix. You can have matrices beyond that. Okay, all the ones that are in this quadrant of the ones we should think about doing, well, maybe there's 5 of them there. Okay, maybe you have another matrix of whatever criteria you have. Maybe that criteria is, okay, it needs to ship by May 15th. Okay, can it or can't it? Can it? You come up with your own criteria. But there needs to be criteria. There needs to be well-defined criteria. It can't just be, ooh, this one would be fun. Ooh, we want to do this. You need to have well-defined criteria. And a lot of people forget about that because it's fun coming up with ideas. Oh, let's do this one. This one's bright and frilly. Okay, but is that the best one?
Well, in terms of products, I love what you said about sometimes, in fact, all the time, we need to think in terms of will this idea, will this product, will this service help somebody with something that they don't even know they have a problem with? They don't know what they're missing. For example, I'm like millions of other people. I didn't know that I needed an iPhone until Steve Jobs told me, here's this device, here's what it can do. And instantly I said, I really need that. I didn't realize I needed that. That's innovative thinking.
That is innovative thinking, coming up with something that you don't know you need yet. And what did he do to come up with that? And, it was him and his entire team, of course. He's the name and the face behind it. But it was basically combining things that already existed and then simplifying it, making it look elegant. That was an important part and still is an important part of what Apple stands for. But you're absolutely right. We didn't know we wanted that. There's this apocryphal adage, which apparently Henry Ford never said. But the adage is, if I'd asked the people what they wanted, they would have said, regarding transportation, they would have said faster horses. Because we tend to look at the future through the lens of the present. We tend to look at the future through the lens of what exists now. In 2018, you would have been hard pressed to find anybody saying, I need AI. Like, I need something like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. It didn't exist. We couldn't imagine it. And now for a number of us, like, oh, well, can't live without that anymore, can we? Or the internet. you know, do we really want that? Do we really need that? Yeah. So part of it is kind of being able to see the patterns, see the trends, see what's around the corner. That's a great question for leaders to ask, or anybody who has customers, clients, patients, whatever you want to call it. Ask the question, what will they need a year from now or 2 years from now that they don't know about? And how can we start solving that problem now? Just ask that question. You may or may not come up with anything, but those are the kind of questions that innovators ask, Roger. They ask those interesting questions, and they don't say, is there something? They say, what is it going to be? Because here's the thing about questions. Our brain is programmed to try and answer any question we put to it. So if we give it a yes or no question, it can just say yes or no. Like, oh, is there a need for this? Nope, time for lunch. Or, can I use this idea in my situation? Nope, time for breakfast. But instead ask, how can I use this? Ooh, okay, now we got something we can sink our little neurons into and come up with answers. So when you ask better questions, you're going to get better answers, and you're going to train your brain to see those connections that other people miss. Innovation is all about connecting dots. When you start mentally connecting dots by asking right questions, your brain starts to get the message that, oh, okay, this is what we're going to be doing now. We're going to be connecting dots.
Sure, you train your brain.
Exactly.
Now, Bill, you are a Hall of Fame speaker. You give keynote addresses all over the world. What kinds of things are you learning from your audiences?
My favorite thing that I learned from my audiences, it's that look on their face, because I'm talking about innovation. And a lot of times it's to audiences that don't tend to think of themselves as particularly innovative or creative. Sometimes it's entire industries that don't tend to think of themselves that way. If I'm speaking to Amazon or Apple or Google or something like that, well, then yeah, they get it. I mean, they're well known for being innovators, but most other organizations and industries aren't really. And they tend to get scared by the word innovation. It's too risky. It's too expensive.
I'm a financial planner. I don't dare be innovative.
That's right. I was speaking to a group of accountants once, and they're just notorious for not thinking of themselves as creative and innovative. And one of them said, well, you don't want your accountant to be too creative. Yeah, I do. I want, now, not illegally so, but I want an accountant who can look at my finance and say, you know what? If we recategorize this, then you can say, like, that's looking at it through the lens of innovation.
Sure.
Yes, I absolutely want that. Or, if we reallocate your resources, we can get, more profit growth. Yes, I want an innovator, not just a manager.
Right.
For my money. So, yeah. And now during my keynotes, I really try and simplify innovation, demystify, de-scarify innovation. Because again, innovation sounds like this big, scary word. Yes, we all want innovation, but how do we do it? We don't really want, we don't know what it is. My job in my keynotes is to let them know that they are actually innovators, that they are, in fact, creative. So the moment I love the most is there are a few activities that we do during the keynote. I like to be very interactive with the keynote.
You're right.
And you kind of, you see it in their eyes. All of a sudden they're doing something, and you can see when it hits, when all of a sudden they start to think, oh, this is innovation? Oh, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
Because people have this mistaken idea that if you don't invent the iPhone, you're not an innovator, and therefore you shouldn't even try.
Right.
If you don't have a genius IQ, then you're not invited to the club. And when all of a sudden they start to get that, wait a minute, I can do this. This is what it is. Yes.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Innovation is easier than people think it is, Roger. Innovation's easier than you think.
I have seen your audiences, and I see the aha expressions on their faces. And I speculate that's exactly what they're thinking. I can do this. Oh, that's what innovation is? I can do that.
Right. There was somebody else in one of your previous episodes. I'm not quite sure who it was, but I remember they used the phrase, leadership is easier. Leadership is actually pretty easy. You can make anything as complex as you want. And yes, there are levels and levels and levels of it, but at its core, innovation is really easy. It's just about seeing a situation and asking one simple question. We all hit roadblocks every day. We all hit our brick walls. Some are bigger and some are littler. And then we gripe about it. And that's where most people stop. Just like, oh, I don't like this. And then they whine and complain, and that's it. The innovator just does one extra step, just one extra step. They ask one simple question, and it's this: how can this be better? The rest of us hit some roadblock, something we don't like. Maybe it's something that happens every single day. And we just go there, I wish somebody would do something about that. That's what most of us do. The innovator, all they do is they take it one more step. So, what might that be?
Right.
Could I do that? That's it.
Bill, if our listeners remember only one idea from this conversation, what should it be?
I think the one idea is that innovation is not a private club. It's an open playground. And everybody is invited to come play. Come on in. It's fun. It's easy.
Bill Stainton, thank you so much for joining us on Leadership. Bill reminds us that innovation doesn't happen just because we hope for it. It happens because we create the conditions where it can thrive. He reminds us that breakthrough ideas are not accidents. They're the result of leaders who stay curious, ask better questions, and make space for experimentation. And he reminds us that creativity is not a personality trait. It's a discipline. The leaders who win tomorrow won't just be the ones with the best ideas, but the ones who create environments where meaningful ideas consistently emerge. As you leave this episode, consider where your team might be waiting for permission to think bigger. What assumptions need to be challenged? What routines need to be disrupted? The future belongs to leaders who cultivate imagination with intention. Your next great idea might already be in the room. It just needs room to breathe. Bill's book is Innovation Unleashed: How to Find the Ideas That Matter and Transform Your Business. And to learn more about Bill's work, go to billstainton.com. That's Bill Stainton, STAINTON.com. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team, your network, or anyone else who's ready to lead with more confidence, more courage, and more impact. And be sure to leave a review for our podcast. Even a single sentence fuels the algorithms that promote the great content that the Leadership podcast provides. And for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadership.net. That's leadership.net. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.